It began with a book. Olivia hadn't been in town long. Just a few weeks, really, long enough to unpack boxes, memorize the best coffee shop hours, and learn that rain in Pine Grove, Massachusetts wasn't so much an event as it was a daily companion. On that particular Sunday, she ducked into the crooked little used bookstore on Mulberry Street not to buy, but to wander. The place smelled like paper and pipe smoke, creaky floorboards beneath her boots, and a bell above the door that jingled with a sleepy charm. She found it tucked on a bottom shelf in the children's corner, nestled between and of Green Gables and Little Women. The Secret Garden, battered and faded, its title barely legible. She smiled, remembering her grandmother reading that very story to her, once upon a time. That thought alone was reason enough to pull it free. But the moment she did, something fluttered to the ground. A card. She bent down, curious. It was laminated, corners curled slightly, and the ink had faded with age. Her fingers stilled when she read the name, Amelia Grant. Olivia's breath caught. Her grandmother. Her mother's mother. The one who, according to the family's hush-hush lore, had simply vanished in 1991. One spring morning she left the house, told her husband she was going to the post office, and never came back. No signs of struggle. No note. No body. Just, gone. Her disappearance had haunted the family, yet her name became almost taboo, spoken rarely and only in half-whispers. And here it was. A relic. A breadcrumb. Turning the card over, Olivia found more, a penciled address, faint but readable, and a date. May 17, 1991. Her fingers tingled. Her chest tightened. She bought the book, the card hidden inside, and left the store with rain pattering softly on her umbrella. But her thoughts were roaring. The address wasn't local. It was in a town about 2 hours away, one Olivia had never heard mentioned in connection with Amelia. Why had her grandmother's library card ended up here? Who had donated that book? Was this a fluke, or a trail? That night, Olivia stared at the card under the glow of her desk lamp. The penciled address seemed to hum with some dormant electricity, waiting to be read by the right person. She reached for her phone and opened her Maps app. The address still existed. An old house on the edge of a tiny town called Ashburn Hollow. Olivia clicked the directions. 2 hours and 16 minutes. She glanced at the calendar. May 17th was only 3 days away. Coincidence? She didn't believe in those anymore. The road to Ashburn Hollow wound through hills and sleepy valleys, past weathered barns and fields dotted with early spring wildflowers. Olivia drove in silence, the hum of her old sedan the only sound accompanying her thoughts. The library card sat in the cup holder like a compass needle, and she caught herself glancing at it more than once. Ashburn Hollow wasn't much to look at, a forgotten cluster of buildings tucked off Route 32, where the main street consisted of a diner, a post office, a feed store, and a library that looked like it belonged in a painting. Brick, ivy-covered, with tall windows and a brass bell on the green door. Olivia parked in front of it, heart thudding. The air was thick with the scent of rain-soaked pavement and lilac. Inside, the library smelled of lemon polish and thyme. Wooden shelves reached up to high ceilings. Dust motes danced in the sunlight. An elderly woman sat at the front desk, hair in a loose silver bun, reading a hardcover mystery with a magnifying glass. "Excuse me," Olivia said gently. The woman looked up with a smile that felt worn in and warm. "Afternoon, dear. Can I help you find something?" "I hope so," Olivia said, stepping closer. She pulled the card from her pocket and placed it gently on the desk. "Do you remember Amelia Grant?" The woman's eyes narrowed as she leaned forward. She picked up the card, turned it over slowly. "Mercy me," she breathed. "I haven't seen this card in 30 years. You knew her?" Olivia asked. "Oh yes. Amelia was, something special. The woman paused, lips pressing into a line. She came here often, always with a stack of borrowed books and a notebook in her purse. She liked poetry. And old maps. She once told me every book had a secret in it, if you knew how to read between the lines. What happened to her? Olivia asked, the words trembling at the edge of her lips. The librarian sighed. One day she just stopped coming. We all assumed she moved. Or, she trailed off. Olivia nodded. She knew the rest. There's an address on the back, she said quietly. Do you know it? The woman blinked slowly. I do. That was the old hollow house. Been empty for decades. Amelia rented it for a few months before she vanished. Goosebumps rippled across Olivia's arms. Is it still there? The librarian nodded. Still stands. Barely. Folks say it's haunted. But I think it's just forgotten. Olivia thanked her and returned to the car with a new destination. The hollow house. The road grew narrower, then gravel, then dirt. Trees leaned close like eavesdroppers. Finally, she saw it, a weather-beaten house with peeling paint, tall grass swallowing the porch, and windows clouded by dust and memory. She stepped out, heart pounding. The air was thick and quiet. As she reached the porch, she hesitated. The door was cracked open. Not wide. Just enough. Like it had been waiting. The door creaked as Olivia pushed it open. Dust swirled in the pale light that filtered through grimy windows. The scent inside was that of old paper, earth, and something faintly floral, lavender, maybe, or something that had once been. She stepped inside slowly. The front room was nearly bare. A fireplace lined with soot. An armchair under a white sheet. A toppled floor lamp. Everything looked like it had been left mid-moment, then forgotten. She moved through the house with cautious reverence, like a diver in a sunken ship. The wooden floors groaned under her steps. Each room held the same stillness, the same hush. Upstairs, in what must have once been a study, she found the only sign of life, or something like it. A bookshelf still clinging to its occupants. Most of the titles were classics, their spines cracked with time. But one caught her eye. A copy of Leaves of Grass by Walt Whitman. She pulled it free. Tucked inside, a folded piece of paper. Yellowed and brittle. She opened it carefully. It was a letter. Written in soft pencil, in elegant, looping script. If you found this, then perhaps I've been found too. I didn't leave because I stopped loving them. I left because I couldn't breathe anymore in a life that was not mine. Some stories aren't meant to be lived out loud. Some are whispered to pages and left behind, waiting for someone who understands silence. If she ever comes looking, tell her I never stopped watching the garden grow. The handwriting was unmistakable. Amelia Grant. Olivia's throat tightened. She read the letter 3 more times before gently folding it back. Back downstairs, she checked the kitchen out of curiosity. Dust-covered counters, rusted faucet. But something under the sink glinted. It was a biscuit tin. Faded red with roses on the lid. Inside, a collection of postcards, more letters, and a black and white photo of a younger Amelia, hair in loose waves, laughing in a field of wildflowers. Some of the letters were addressed to someone named M. R. Lorne. She took the tin. Back in the car, Olivia sat still for a long while. The tin on her lap. Her heart full and confused. Her grandmother hadn't just disappeared. She had gone searching for something. Or someone. And she had left a trail. Back in Pinegrove that night, Olivia spread the contents of the tin on her kitchen table. She arranged the letters by date. The last one was dated May 16, 1991, the day before Amelia disappeared. The letter was short. Tomorrow, I leave the life they chose for me. If I don't make it back, know that I finally chose for myself. Olivia leaned back in her chair. Her grandmother hadn't vanished. She had stepped through a door, one no one else had seen. But where did that door lead? The next morning, Olivia sat cross-legged on the floor, the tin beside her, sipping lukewarm coffee and surrounded by letters. She carefully read each one, noting the delicate handwriting, the poetic turns of phrase, the subtle longing stitched between lines. It became clear that M.R. Lorne was someone important to Amelia, perhaps more than a friend. One letter in particular stood out. It wasn't signed. It wasn't even folded. It was scribbled in the margin of a book, a volume of Emily Dickinson's poetry, tucked into the bottom of the tin. He waits by the river at dusk. If I don't return, I hope he knows I tried. There was something haunting about it. Olivia flipped through the book and found more notes, faint penciled markings next to poems about journeys, escape, transformation. And on the inside back cover, a single address. Riverbend Bookshop, Bellamy, Vermont. Her heart skipped. She reached for her laptop. Bellamy was 4 hours north, tucked away in the hills, nearly forgotten by the world. The bookshop still existed. It even had a modest website. And according to the About Us section, it had been around since the 1970s, family-run the entire time. She called the listed number. Riverbend, a voice answered, gravelly but warm. Hi, this might sound strange, but I'm looking for someone named M.R. Lorne, Olivia said. Or someone who might have known Amelia Grant. A pause. The man chuckled. Now there's a name I haven't heard in a long while. Her breath caught. So you did know her? I did. And if you're asking about M.R., well, you better come visit. Some stories don't tell themselves over the phone. He gave her directions. Told her to come before sunset. The light in the shop's best then, he said. It makes old ghosts kinder. That afternoon, Olivia packed a bag and drove north. The landscape shifted as she climbed into the hills, denser woods, winding roads, and a sky that stretched wider with every mile. Bellamy felt like stepping into a forgotten postcard. The Riverbend Bookshop sat at the end of a cobbled lane, its sign hand-painted, ivy curling around the porch. Inside, the scent of cedar and parchment wrapped around her like an old friend. Olivia? She turned to see a man in his 70s, lean with white hair pulled into a loose ponytail. He wore a corduroy vest over a chambray shirt and had a gaze like weathered stone. Yes, she said. That's me. I'm Edwin Lorne. M.R. was my brother. Olivia's chest tightened. He gestured toward a pair of armchairs by the fireplace. Let me tell you a story, he said, about a woman who loved books, hated expectations, and once changed the course of a quiet man's life forever. Edwin poured them both a cup of tea, steeped strong, earthy. The crackling of the fireplace filled the silence as Olivia waited, nerves quietly dancing beneath her skin. My brother, Martin Ray, Edwin began, was never much for noise. He was a schoolteacher, a writer in secret. Never published, mind you, but he had journals, notebooks full of thoughts and stories. He moved here to Bellamy in 1988. That same year, Amelia walked through that very door. Olivia leaned forward. She came in on a rainy Tuesday. Asked if we had the bell jar. Said she was just passing through, but something in her eyes, it was like she was searching for something deeper than a book. She and Martin talked for an hour that day. Edwin smiled softly. They talked every day after that. He reached behind a shelf and pulled out a small box, placing it gently in Olivia's lap. Inside were letters, Amelia's handwriting again, unmistakable. And photographs. Black and white shots of her and a man with kind eyes and a crooked smile, Martin. She stayed here for nearly 6 months, Edwin said. Rented the loft above the bakery. They'd walk by the river every evening. She laughed often, but there was always a sadness too. She never told Martin everything. Only that she'd come from a life that didn't feel like her own. Why did she leave? Olivia asked, barely a whisper. She got a letter, Edwin said. I don't know what it said. But the day after she read it, she packed her things and left. No goodbye. Just a note for Martin, I'll return if I can breathe again someday. Olivia's eyes stung. She was pregnant, she said aloud, piecing the timeline together. Edwin nodded slowly. Martin suspected as much. He waited for her. Months turned to years. He never stopped writing to her, even though he had no address. He put the letters in books. Said they were meant for the future. Olivia's hands trembled as she held the box. Inside were pieces of a love story never told, like chapters left scattered. Do you think she came back? She asked. Edwin stood and walked to a high shelf, pulling down an old guest book. There's something you should see. He flipped to a yellowed page near the back. There it was. A name. Amelia Lorne. Dated, May 17, 1991. The same day as the card. She came back? Olivia breathed. For one day, Edwin said. She left a donation, bought a copy of Leaves of Grass, and said she was going back to finish something. He paused. She never returned again. Olivia stared at the name, the date, the trembling curve of the letters. She wasn't just lost, Olivia whispered. She was trying to find her way. And suddenly, the mystery didn't feel like a cold trail anymore. It felt alive. Olivia stayed the night in Bellamy, in a tiny bed and breakfast that smelled of cinnamon and fresh linen. She barely slept. Her mind wandered through the letters, the photographs, the memory of her grandmother laughing beside the river. By dawn, she was back at Riverbend Bookshop. Edwin had left her a note on the counter. Read the books. Start with the ones she marked. The margins will speak. So she did. Edwin showed her the shelf where Amelia had spent the most time. Each book bore her small, tidy pencil notes in the margins, comments, questions, occasional lines of poetry or observations like breadcrumbs. Into the lighthouse she'd underlined a passage about fleeting time, writing beside it, "We are not what we leave behind, but what we choose to carry." In Jane Eyre, she wrote, "Sometimes love is not an escape. It's a return." Each margin whispered secrets. And each secret stitched a clearer portrait of Amelia, a woman caught between duty and desire, family and self, longing and fear. And then Olivia found the final book. It was a leather-bound journal, hidden between 2 volumes of poetry. On the inside cover, written in ink, "For the girl who finds the card. A.G." Olivia's breath hitched. She opened it. Inside were pages of handwritten notes, not dated, but clearly written for someone. Perhaps for her. Perhaps for no one. But they told the rest of the story. Amelia had fallen in love with Martin. That much was clear. But she felt trapped between her past and her future. A family that didn't understand her, a life she had never chosen. And the fear, of judgment, of scandal, of losing her child. So she left. She tried to return, briefly. But her home felt colder than the place she'd just come from. And when she realized she couldn't bring both parts of herself together, her family and her freedom, she chose freedom. One entry stood out. "If Olivia ever finds this, know this, I never stopped loving your mother. Or you. But I wasn't strong enough to fight both the world and myself. I left not to abandon, but to breathe. If this makes me a ghost in your story, let it be one who loved you from afar." Tears rolled down Olivia's cheeks. Her grandmother hadn't run away from love. She had run toward it. Toward herself. Back home in Pine Grove, Olivia sat with her mother in the kitchen, the tin of letters between them. Her mother's hands trembled as she read the first few lines. "I always thought she'd just left," she whispered. "That something terrible happened." "Something did," Olivia said softly. "But not the kind you think." They sat in silence, 2 generations unbraiding decades of silence. That night, Olivia opened The Secret Garden again. Not the one from the bookstore, but the copy from Amelia's house, the one she'd found on the bookshelf beside Leaves of Grass. There, in the final chapter, Amelia had written, "Not all who disappear are lost. Some are simply waiting for the right hands to turn the page." Spring bloomed slowly in Pinegrove. Olivia found herself walking more, through the park, around the bookstore, and especially to the small community garden behind her apartment. It wasn't anything grand, just raised beds and a crooked bench under a willow tree. But the air was fragrant with mint, basil, and tomato vines, and it had become her place to think. One morning, she arrived early with coffee and a worn journal, the one Amelia had left behind. She had read it through twice now, even copied some of the passages into her own notebook. Her favorite. "We are all made of pages. Some are worn, dog-eared, forgotten. But every page matters. Every crease, every margin." A few weeks later, Olivia hosted a reading night at the library. She called it Found Words. Locals gathered to read forgotten letters, diary entries, scribbled thoughts tucked into secondhand books. She told Amelia's story, softly, with grace, not naming names, just telling the tale of a woman who left not out of malice, but in pursuit of air. And that night, as people lingered, something beautiful happened. A woman shared a postcard she'd found in an antique store, addressed to someone named M. Another man brought an old family cookbook with dedications in the margins, stories of people who were long gone but never forgotten. Stories, it seemed, had a way of finding the right ears. That summer, Olivia and her mother visited Ashburn Hollow together. They stood in front of the hollow house, which seemed gentler in the sunlight. Overgrown but peaceful. "She lived here?" her mother asked, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "She did," Olivia replied. "And I think she loved it." They planted lavender near the porch. A small sign staked beside it read, "For Amelia, who found her own way." Back home, Olivia began writing. Not fiction, not yet. Just memories. A memoir of sorts. Of books and margins. Of silence and discovery. Of a library card that turned out to be a map. Months later, on the anniversary of Amelia's disappearance, Olivia returned to Riverbend Bookshop. Edwin greeted her with a hug. "She'd be proud of you," he said simply. "Not just of me," Olivia smiled. "Of herself, too." She left a copy of her manuscript with him, wrapped in brown paper. On the front, written in ink. "For the girl who finds the card." Outside, the river sparkled in the golden light of evening. And for a moment, Olivia imagined Amelia sitting there once, reading a book, a smile tugging at the corners of her mouth, content to be both story and storyteller. Because some stories aren't meant to end. They're meant to be found, again and again. Just waiting for someone to turn the page.